Hello everybody and welcome to the Opera Cecilia YouTube channel. My name is Taylor Gonzaga and I'm the founder and artistic director of Opera Cecilia, a company made by and for artists. And in between performances of our regular season, we've already done one completely virtual opera. We are also going to be doing a really cool Christmas concert coming up in December as the second performance of our season. I actually got a request as a part of my opera series on this channel of reaction videos to do Gelida Manina from La Bohème, specifically Luciano Pavarotti's version. If you have not seen my video on Luciano Pavarotti's interpretation of Nessun Dorma from Puccini's Turandot, that's a different Puccini opera, I definitely encourage you to check it out. And I include a lot more background information on Pavarotti as an artist in general. In this video, I'm not going to provide as much background information on Pavarotti himself. So Gelida Manina is a beautiful tenor aria. It's one of the most recorded tenor arias of all time, historically, and it is from the opera La Bohème by Puccini. This is probably one of the top operas that most companies include in their seasons, like every year. It is super in the standard repertoire and super palatable for audiences. It's also a fantastic opera for first-time opera goers to attend. All of the background information and synopsis information I'll be sharing with you are from the Met Opera website and from the Sarasota Opera website, so I just wanted to thank those two organizations for providing such great educational resources via their websites to the general public. If you're a musical theater lover, the Broadway musical Rent is actually kind of loosely based on the story of La Bohème. I find more and more connections between those two genres as I continue to dive into both in my own career. The fourth opera written by Italian composer Giacomo Puccini. He was born 1858 and died 1924, so this is well into like the later end of the Romance era of opera, kind of a golden age in my opinion for operatic literature. The path to creating this fresh and original opera was a torturous one for Puccini and his librettists. It was only after numerous changes of structure and detail that the work which audiences recognized as Puccini's La Bohème came into existence. Following the huge critical and popular success in early 1893 of his third opera, Manon Lescaut, Puccini divided his attention by composing two new operas simultaneously. These were La Lupa, or translated to The She-Wolf, based on Giovanni Varga's short story of a peasant life in Sicily, and La Bohème. He gave preference to La Lupa at first, but then finally decided to abandon the project and then but he incorporated some of the music he was already writing for the Sicilian opera into this Parisian opera. And just because it takes place in Paris does not mean it's not sung in Italian. Obviously, this aria is sung in Italian. Even with all of Puccini's attention focused on La Bohème, its creation did not occur swiftly. The composer demanded many changes from the opera's two librettists. Because of Puccini's unhappiness with the work, one of his librettists actually complained to the publisher, Ricordi, that he had rewritten the complete libretto 3 times and certain sections 4 times in order to appease Puccini. So Puccini sounds like he might have been a little bit on the difficult side to work with. A genius, but a little difficult to work with. The librettist's job adapting Henry Murger's book Scenes de la Vie de Bohème was not easy. French author Murger wrote a work filled with many unrelated episodes and populated with numerous characters based on authentic Parisian figures. The librettist had to create a coherent, dramatic plot from the unconnected stories, which is very challenging to do. Stage shows and opera librettos are challenging to make in general, but when you have all of these different fragmented parts, I could only imagine how difficult that was to create. La Bohème, on the whole, was greeted in a friendly fashion by the audience, but the majority of the critics were actually hostile to this work. I find it so interesting. You see this in cinema, you see this in visual arts as well. A lot of art that critics don't initially like or that gets really bad reviews actually tends to be the art that is the most well received by the public. It's kind of sad that a lot of these composers and artists in general don't get to actually see how prolific their work was for society, because they're usually dead by the time things make history. Your art outlives you, unfortunately. And fortunately, I guess, at the same time, because everybody likes the idea of leaving a legacy. After the first production of the opera, Puccini again demanded new alterations. So even after the opera was already premiered, there were still new alterations happening. This opera is broken up into 3 acts, but the story is quite palatable for the audience. I would encourage, if you're a brand new opera lover or opera goer, totally go see this full opera for the first time. If it's your first time going, it is a wonderful experience, and the characters are very based in realism with a little bit of a verismo element. So verismo was an operatic genre that was talking a lot about truth, and it wanted to get to the heart of grittier characters that represented more of the majority in society, or even the lower classes in society, instead of just high society characters like royalty being represented in operas. Act 1, Paris in the 1830s. In their Latin quarter garret, the near destitute artists Marcello and poet Rodolfo, which is the character that sings the aria we'll be hearing soon, they try to keep warm on Christmas Eve by feeding the stove with pages from Rodolfo's latest drama. They are soon joined by their roommates, Colline, a philosopher, and Schonard, I think I'm pronouncing that name right, I hope so, a musician who brings food, fuel, and funds he has collected from an eccentric nobleman. While they celebrate their unexpected fortune, the landlord, Benoit, comes to collect the rent. After getting the older men drunk, yes, there is a lot of drinking and revelry in opera for sure. The friends urge him to tell of his flirtations and then throw him out in mock indignation at his infidelity to his wife. So they're kind of messing with him a little bit. As the others depart to revel at the Café Momus. Yeah, I'm gonna keep going. Rodolfo remains behind to finish an article, promising to join them later. There is another knock at the door. The visitor is Mimi, a pretty neighbor whose candle has gone out in the stairwell. If you know anything about Rent as a musical, there's also a very similar scene in that musical that is based off of this opera. But Mimi realizes that she's lost her key when she's fainted and has the two search for it. Both candles go out, so there's no power. Rodolfo finds the key and slips it into his pocket. In the moonlight, he takes Mimi's hand and tells her about his dreams. She recounts her life alone in a lofty garret, embroidering flowers and waiting for the spring. Rodolfo's friends call from outside, telling him to join them. He responds that he is not alone and will be along shortly. Happy to have found each other, Mimi and Rodolfo leave arm in arm for the cafe. So they sort of have this very, very loving encounter when they first meet each other, and that's where gelida, manina comes into play. I think it's really, really cool the direction that opera was going in at this time, and this particular aria represents that direction very well. So now we're going to get into the actual opera aria. Wow, I can't speak today. I just wanted to stop there real quick and comment on his vocal technique. So right from the start, we're getting super, super balanced onsets. All of Pavarotti's onsets when he sings in terms of vocal technique are so not only expressive, but also very technically efficient. And what I mean by a balanced onset is when the air and the tone come in at the same time. Not a glottal onset where the tone comes first and produces kind of a sound when you start, or an aspirated onset, which is when the air comes first, and so you hear a lot of breathiness in the voice. He has so much balance in his tone, and that's how you create kind of that operatic chiaro scuro, which basically means the balance between bright and dark sounds. I believe I said something about that in his Nessun Dorma video too. These are all reasons. This incredibly balanced, technically efficient singing is one of the core reasons why people loved Luciano Pavarotti's voice so much. He had so much technical efficiency, he was able to so easily serve the operatic line, have that beautiful quality to his singing that served the composer's music so well. He didn't need to put on airs outside of it or overcompensate for it. He just let the music speak for itself through his voice. He's not the most expressive in his face, but he almost doesn't need to be, because he pours all of that expression into his instrument. He's like, let me take your cold hand. By the way, that's Freni. I think you pronounce her first name Mariella Freni. She is also a very, very, very famous, prominent soprano. And I chose this particular performance where he's singing this with her because he seems to have a special kind of tenderness when he's performing on stage with her.
Aspetti, signorina, le dirò con due parole. Chi
This is a notoriously difficult aria to sing for a tenor, and the reason why is because one, Rodolfo is just a difficult role for a tenor in general, and two, there's multiple high notes in this aria, and you have to be both powerful and delicate at the same time, so that this first meeting between Mimi and Rodolfo doesn't come off as abrasive. Real quick before we keep going, I just wanted to stop briefly and say that that was a beautiful dynamic contrast. And dynamic contrasts are an awesome way in this aria to achieve that balance between powerful vocalism and tender intimacy.
Sono un poeta, e cosa faccio? Scrivo, e come vivo.
He's talking about his poetry. So what was beautiful about that section of the aria as well is you notice that it was a little bit more speech motivated. It sounded almost more akin to a recitative than it did to the full aria. And one of the reasons why he perhaps made that part more speech motivated is so that, well, one, he's getting excited about what he's telling her about, and he's kind of talking about his life as a poet and his work as a poet at this point. But then on top of that, it also allows him to pace himself for what's to come, because this is far from the climax of this aria emotionally, and he's kind of welcoming her into his world. And so it's that's another way to have a balance of tenderness with forthright singing, is for him to have moments where he can back off dynamically a little bit, that are a little bit lower in his range, and he has an ability to kind of just speak or have more speech-like patterns for a little while. What you also notice in Puccini's composition, and what Pavarotti so beautifully does with his Italian phrasing as an Italian speaker himself, is that he's composing the music according to the rhythm that you would naturally speak these words in. The mark of a composer that is really writing works for characters that are living real lives. You're portraying an entire human being in this opera with the character of Rodolfo. Now we're getting higher in tessitura.
Entrare con voi ora per i miei sogni usati, e i miei sogni miei, tosto si leguare, ai la furre colomba ancora.
Part of the reason why we are so charmed by Puccini's scores is those beautiful romantic swells of the orchestra. They back off at the perfect times when the singers lower in their tessitura, so that the beauty of Luciano Pavarotti's voice can be highlighted that much easier. And then they swell and come to a climax whenever he goes up for a higher note, or whenever he's getting a little bit more emotional in the aria. This is one of the reasons why opera can be so emotionally moving for people, is because it is written to provoke as much emotion as possible. And if you learn a little bit more about the music, or you know more about the context of this show, then it is easier to see that. Also, let's comment on our beautiful soprano's acting skills here. Freni is doing a wonderful, wonderful job of feeding off of him in the scene and creating that sense of intimacy. And even though she's not singing, she is helping create so many beautiful moments, and she's fueling the fire for his emotional expression. This is how actors can feed off of each other. Not only are we creating a beautiful moment on stage for the audience, but we're helping our singer that's having their shining moment, even if it's not our turn to sing the big shining moment yet. Okay, so we have to comment on how beautifully efficiently sung that high note was. So he allowed the lower notes to prepare him for the high. That is a big thing. So you want to start having the right placements, the right vowel settings in the low, so that you're already in that placement for the high and you don't have to adjust midway through. The other thing that was so beautiful is not only did he have this nice soft palate lift happening, which is the back of the roof of your mouth and just allowing it to kind of lift up a little bit, create the space inside your mouth, but he was able to create dynamics all the way through that note. I've said many times in my videos before that the human voice was not meant to sing statically, and he is so beautiful with demonstrating what dynamics can do to make a high note swell and sound gorgeous with a romantic orchestral score. The fact that he sings that with so much ease, but so much emotional fervor at the same time. And the fact that he's mainly expressing that all just through his vocal instrument. He doesn't have to do much with his facial expressions for us to be emotionally moved by his singing. His singing was really a full body experience, and it was so beautiful to see. Mirella Freni. I totally butchered her name earlier because I hadn't seen it in writing in quite a while. She is an absolutely wonderful soprano. She plays a beautiful Mimi, and there's plenty of footage of her on the interwebs singing Mimi's arias. Luciano Pavarotti is a very loved entity both in and out of the opera world. He was one of the top singers to make it into mainstream. He's just a gem. I hope that this video gives you a little bit of an insight as to why this is such an emotionally effective piece of music, why Pavarotti himself was so emotionally effective as a performer, and why opera is just so dang cool. Support your opera company, and don't just support the big opera companies, support the little regional companies too, because those ones are super important and have absolutely fabulous artists performing at them as well. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. I am so over the moon blessed to be going on this journey with all of you, and I hope to see you all around here again soon. Bye.